Hey there, night owls. Or maybe just tired humans pretending tomorrow's deadlines don't exist. Go ahead. Pull that blanket up. Adjust your pillow. Silence the notifications. Tonight we're wandering down one of history's less glamorous alleys. Forget daring sword fights or rooftop parkour. This is the actual paperwork-smelling, poorly lit reality of the so-called professional killers of the Middle Ages. I know, assassin sounds dramatic. We picture black cloaks, poisoned daggers, a moonlit leap over a balustrade, maybe a sinister flute playing in the distance. Hollywood has done its thing. Reality? Reality is usually damp boots, questionable stew, and a lot of waiting around in drafty corners, hoping nobody recognizes your face before payday. So let's dim the myth and stretch the facts. One slow breath at a time. Picture medieval Europe around the 13th century. Forget polished castles gleaming in the sun. Most fortresses are basically damp stone piles with a smell you don't want to investigate. A career as an assassin? Not a LinkedIn option. It's an arrangement of desperation. Somebody wealthy or influential needs someone gone, quietly. Someone else is poor, hungry, morally flexible, and not entirely opposed to travel at night. And voila. A contract is whispered over a goblet of watered wine. Already the glamour is wilting. There's no guild health insurance, no secret assassin spa retreat. You might get coin. You might also get caught, tortured, and end your days with a creative public execution that doubles as local entertainment. It's more gig economy than prestige, just with a higher decapitation rate. A lot of the mystique clings to the so-called hashashin, that vaguely exotic term people love to drop at trivia nights. Yes, the Nizari Ismailis of the 11th, 13th centuries were sometimes labeled with a word Europeans mangled into assassin. They occupied mountain fortresses in Persia and Syria, sending young devotees on missions that usually ended badly for the devotee. Chroniclers, mostly hostile, embroidered wild tales of paradise gardens and drug-fueled loyalty. Historians roll their eyes. Actual records suggest less mystic haze, more practical politics. Small state, big neighbors, sabotage required. For a rank-and-file recruit, life was repetitive. Guard the fortress. Memorize local alleyways. Hope your superiors don't volunteer you for a martyrdom operation, which is just workplace jargon for, we don't expect you back. Medieval job satisfaction surveys were not glowing. Let's glide northward into Europe, where political murder was more opportunistic. A duke wants his rival cousin out of the inheritance picture. He hires, well, whoever's handy. Sometimes a disgruntled knight. Sometimes a groom with debts. Sometimes a cook. Poison was the freelancer's friend. Picture a damp kitchen, a pot of overly salted broth, and a bottle of something suspicious accidentally tipping in. All this excitement only to have the would-be victim skip dinner because of heartburn. You're left sweating over leftovers, praying nobody notices the extra vial hidden in your apron. Success, if you're lucky, doesn't bring champagne. It brings silence, a purse of coins tossed at you, and the perpetual fear your employer may now want to tie up loose ends. Congratulations, you are a loose end. And about those weapons, forget sleek stiletto blades. Most medieval daggers looked like badly sharpened tent stakes. Compact, yes, but subtle? Not really. They clanged. They snagged on belts. Coats weren't designed with hidden murder pocket technology. Plus, armor existed. Sneaking up behind a baron in a mail hauberk meant your perfect thrust might bounce like a spoon on a soup pot. Cue awkward silence, followed by your frantic sprint into a very annoyed crowd. Let's not forget medieval record-keeping. or the lack thereof. You might succeed, but rumor spreads. Witnesses whisper. The local priest, suspicious, drops your description in the next confession. It's hard to disappear into the crowd when the entire market town has 2 streets and half the villagers are your cousin. People sometimes ask, why did anyone even try? Mostly desperation. Serfdom didn't pay well. War chewed through manpower. A rogue's reputation closed most honest doors. A purse of silver offered a glimmer of solvency, if you lived long enough to spend it. For every supposed master assassin, there were dozens of bungled attempts, many ending with someone dangling from a gallows while the sheriff calmly sipped ale nearby. It's worth pausing here, sinking deeper into the pillow, to appreciate the sheer boredom between jobs. Months could pass. No patrons, no targets, just trudging muddy roads, hawking whatever small valuables you hadn't pawned, hoping your dagger wouldn't rust entirely. Romantic life? Essentially nil. Nobody's inviting the guy who maybe stabbed a reeve last winter to Sunday supper. Assassination also wasn't some social equalizer. Nobles sometimes hired killers, but nobles could also afford guards, moats, dogs, and thick doors. A low-born assassin stood out like a goat at a banquet. That meant cozying up to household staff, bribing a chambermaid, flattering a gatekeeper, praying your bribes weren't pocketed and your plan immediately reported. Each new accomplice doubled the risk of betrayal. Humans love talking, especially when threatened with hot irons. By now you might wonder, was poison at least easier? Slightly. But medieval poison lore was a messy mix of hearsay, herbal superstition, and tragic guesswork. Arsenic existed, but doses were guess and check, usually checkmate for someone, not always the intended someone. Tasteless, odorless? Sometimes, sometimes not. An unlucky assassin could end up sampling too liberally and becoming his own cautionary tale. The moral climate didn't help. Religion infused daily life. Homicide, particularly sneaky homicide, was a fast track to damnation in most sermons. You'd need hefty penance, maybe lifelong pilgrimage, which isn't exactly conducive to spending your earnings. And if your employer was also pious, well, he might redeem himself by handing you over. Loyalty was seasonal. Let's float toward a famous cautionary vignette, the attempted killing of England's Edward II in the 1320s. Politics were messy, alliances paper-thin. Edward's enemies supposedly orchestrated his imprisonment and eventual demise, involving something unprintably unpleasant with a heated implement, which historians now debate. Glamorous intrigue? Not so much. Mostly gloom, backroom bargains, and servants too terrified to speak plainly. And the killers? Anonymous footnotes. No statues, no legends, no commemorative tavern songs. It's soothing to notice how myth outshines drudgery. Later writers, hungry for drama, painted assassins as shadowy geniuses. Meanwhile, real hired blades bumbled through human unpredictability. Horses went lame. Bridges washed out. Servants refused bribes. Tavern talk spilled secrets. One delayed cart or closed gate could unravel months of plotting. Imagine you, cloaked figure, crouched behind a rain barrel all night waiting for Lord So-and-so to wander outside. Dawn breaks. He never appears. Your legs are numb, your bread's soggy, and the gate watchman eyes you suspiciously. Congratulations, you are one mistaken cough away from the stocks. The economics were equally bleak. A reasonable fee might buy you a few goats, maybe some roof repairs. There was no assassin mansion, no velvet cloaks embroidered with skulls. Pay was handshake level. Silver today, anonymity tomorrow. Inflated prices risked betrayal. Undercharging meant starvation. And if you misjudged your employer's solvency, you might find yourself chasing him across counties, awkwardly demanding payment for a crime everyone's now gossiping about. We can soften into the larger picture. Medieval society wasn't bustling with hitmen roaming every alley. Most disputes ended with bribes, oaths, or clumsy duels. Contract killing was rare, whispered, morally dubious. That makes the handful of cases stand out in chronicles like neon, giving us a skewed sense of frequency. Chroniclers loved drama. Ordinary days, plowing, baking, repairing thatched roofs, didn't sell manuscripts. So next time a movie zooms across moonlit rooftops, think instead of moldy straw mattresses, sour ale, perpetual paranoia. That's the bedtime truth. Medieval assassination was risky temp work with zero retirement plan. The only guild perk was an early grave, unmarked and unmentioned. Deep breath. Let's drift sideways, away from shadowed daggers, into another weird medieval career choice you probably wouldn't put on your resume: royal food tasting. Because if you thought knives were stressful, wait until every bite might be your last. All right, settle a little deeper. Let the first part drift off like a creaky drawbridge lowering over a moat. We're still in the Middle Ages, still in the world of damp boots and lukewarm ale, but sliding into a slightly different job description, one that frankly sounds cushy until you notice the fine print. Royal food tasting. It conjures images of polished platters, gleaming goblets, maybe some applause for your sophisticated palate. Reality. You are the disposable human canary shoved in front of a stew pot. If the king's venison is poisoned, congratulations. You've just validated the kitchen's homicide prevention plan by collapsing first. Court life looked glamorous from a muddy village. Palaces, banners, music. Inside, anxiety simmered like last week's broth. Poison was the invisible boogeyman of every ambitious noble. A tiny pinch of something unpronounceable in the mead, and the throne suddenly has a vacancy. So kings and dukes invented a safety net: make someone else swallow the risk. Enter the taster, sometimes officially titled cupbearer or sewer. Yes, medieval job titles were unfortunate. Duties? Sample a sliver of roast, sip the wine, keep smiling while everyone stares at you for the next 15 minutes. If you stayed upright, His Majesty dug in. If you didn't, well, panic, prayers, and a frantic search for a new taster. Romantic? Hardly. Imagine standing beside a royal table, your stomach already queasy from nerves as a silver plate of questionable poultry glistens under candlelight. You carve off a bite, force a grin, chew, and then wait, eyes watering, sweat forming, while courtiers whisper. Every hiccup feels like impending doom. Even the safest dish can trigger paranoia. Chicken bones stuck in your throat? Congratulations, half the court just sprinted for the chapel. Pay? Better than field labor, worse than genuine peace of mind. You might receive a tidy stipend, maybe lodgings in the palace, maybe even the occasional leftover pastry. But the risk-benefit ratio leans lopsided. One ambitious cousin with a vial of nightshade, and your entire career arc becomes a cautionary anecdote. Cupbearers faced similar jitters. Monarchs loved wine but loved breathing even more. So each goblet passed through a ritual dance: pour, sniff, swirl, sip, observe. Onlookers waited for you to keel over like an upended candle. Survive, and the king casually clinked his chalice as if nothing had happened. Lose consciousness, and well, job security suddenly belonged to your replacement. It didn't help that medieval medical knowledge was about as reliable as a wet parchment map. Symptoms of poisoning overlapped with symptoms of bad shellfish, indigestion, or, frankly, existing in a smoky hall full of sweaty nobles. If you sneezed after sipping, suspicion flared. Cue frantic prayers, hastily summoned physicians, and your private vow never to eat mushrooms again. One famous royal warrior was Emperor Claudius of Rome. We're drifting backward a few centuries here, but bear with me, Europe never stops recycling its fears. Ancient sources claim he employed multiple tasters and elaborate serving protocols. Still, rumor holds he died by poison courtesy of his wife Agrippina. Moral: you can sample every platter, but if your spouse is determined, good luck. Fast forward to later medieval courts, and the paranoia persists. French kings, English kings, dukes of Burgundy, they all kept a nervous eye on their goblets. Chronicles mention officials like the échanson in France, the cupbearer in England, often drawn from trusted noble families. Prestige existed, yes, but so did the quiet knowledge that your digestive tract was royal homeland security. Let's wander into a typical feast scene. Dim hall, rush-strewn floor, candles sputtering. Platters parade in, swan roasted and gilded. Eel pies, something unrecognizable but glistening ominously. You, the taster, step forward. All eyes track your fork. The king casually scratches his beard while you nibble eel, chew slowly, swallow, and wait. Seconds feel like hours. Conversation stalls. Someone coughs. Finally, with no dramatic collapse, the king chuckles and digs in. Courtiers resume gossip. You exhale quietly and contemplate a career in goat herding. Some tasters tried clever workarounds. Sample minimal bites, spit discreetly, pray nobody notices. Others developed iron stomachs, or just lucky genetics. Superstition sprouted. Chew parsley for protection. Wear charms against venom. Recite a saint's prayer before swallowing. Whether effective or placebo, comfort mattered. But palace rumors never slept. A taster who accidentally skipped sampling or showed suspicious favoritism might face accusations of collusion. Even loyalty couldn't guarantee trust. Monarchs replaced tasters on whim, fearing complacency. Imagine enduring 5 years of poultry-based anxiety, only to be dismissed because the astrologer sensed ill omens. There's a quieter, sadder angle: human expendability. The monarch's life carried dynastic weight. Your life was less essential. Everyone politely agreed you'd accepted the risk. Chroniclers rarely recorded a dead taster's name. The king's dinner continued. Court musicians struck up another lute piece. Somewhere in the servants' wing, your bunk emptied. This isn't to say tasters lived only in terror. Some found routine, even pride. I Keep My Lord Alive Nightly has a certain resume appeal. Comforts, decent clothes, proximity to power, maybe the occasional wink from a bored lady-in-waiting, softened the existential dread. Human adaptability is astonishing. Give us steady meals and mild status. We'll normalize almost anything. Slide a little deeper into the pillow. Notice how these jobs echo the medieval obsession with hierarchy. Risk flowed downward. Monarch's palate must be safe, so someone lower absorbs danger. Breadline peasants never worried about arsenic and pheasant. They worried about having any bread at all. Yet at court, subtle death by herbs haunted conversation like an uninvited cousin. By the late Middle Ages, poison lore gained theatrical flair. Italian courts in the Renaissance practically turned suspicion into an art form. Manuals whispered of aqua tofana, powders dissolving unseen. Tasters, increasingly professionalized, honed rituals, silver utensils, supposedly tarnishing near toxins, hand-washing ceremonies, scripted prayers. Science lagged centuries behind superstition, but appearances comforted nobles. Occasionally, a king defied protocol, either from bravado or boredom. Henry VIII of England reportedly sampled dishes himself, confident sheer royal destiny shielded him. Historians shrug. Henry also trusted astrologers, jousted recklessly, and married like he was speed-running matrimony. Probability eventually caught up with everyone, but Henry lucked out. Poison wasn't his finale. We should acknowledge the emotional toll. Chronic low-grade fear seeps into dreams. Some tasters surely cultivated stoicism, others ulcers. Diaries rarely survive, but you can imagine entries. Sampled cold venison. Lived. Repeat 50 times. Every twinge of indigestion, every delayed burp spiraled into dread. Bedtime wasn't restful. It was a nightly recap of mortality. Let's meander into a cousin occupation, the royal groom of the stool, technically in charge of, yes, exactly what it sounds like. If you thought tasting was undignified, consider supervising monarchal bathroom logistics. Strange as it seems, the job carried intimacy and, oddly, trust. Handling a king's chamber pot meant confidential proximity, sometimes political influence. Courtiers angled for it. Power smelled stronger than, well, anything else. Perspective is everything. Cupbearers, tasters, stool grooms, they illustrate a truth. Proximity to power invites absurd hazards. Servants hovered like minor planets around a royal sun, hoping warmth outweighed incineration. Some thrived, navigating etiquette like tightrope walkers. Others burned out quietly, swallowed by palace rumor mills. Breathe. Notice how the grandeur of castles masks an undercurrent of constant low-level panic. Every polished goblet carried a whisper of danger, every banquet an unspoken lottery. For the historian, this irony hums gently across centuries. Civilization marches, paranoia lingers. Next, let's shuffle along to another overlooked medieval gig, royal messengers. You think modern email is stressful? Try galloping muddy roads, dodging bandits, and hoping your saddle sores don't burst before you deliver a duke's love letter. Ease your shoulders, maybe take a sip of water. We're riding out of the Great Hall now, slipping into the drizzle with a satchel of parchment strapped to a saddle that definitely hasn't been oiled since the last equinox. Being a medieval royal messenger looked noble on paper. Trusted emissary of the crown. But mostly it was damp socks, unpredictable inns, and the nagging thought that highwaymen considered you a mobile wallet. Picture the 14th century countryside. No streetlights, no signage beyond a creaking wooden board declaring "Ye Mill," that way. Roads are rutted mud lanes with ambitions of being rivers after rain. Bridges? Optional? Streams? Cold, deeper than they look, and full of local gossiping frogs. A royal letter must go from Castle A to Castle B, post haste. You, weary scribe, are volunteered. Congratulations, this is your cardio for the month. Unlike Hollywood, where messengers gallop heroically across sunsets, real life was more trot, splash, trudge. Horses weren't perpetually fresh chargers. Sometimes they were farm nags repurposed for urgent statecraft. Saddles creaked ominously. Hooves slipped. You whispered prayers to saints you barely remembered, promising improved piety if you avoided another ankle-deep bog. Security? An optimistic term. Travel was a patchwork of petty tolls, surly gatekeepers, and informal road taxes levied by local toughs with clubs. Carrying royal seals painted a target on your back. Bandits reasoned, where there's a seal, there's silver. Truth, often no silver, just wax, parchment, and your rapidly fraying nerves. Bandit encounters varied. Some demanded coin politely. Some skipped straight to clubbing. Diplomacy skills mattered. A well-placed loaf of bread or flask of ale could buy safe passage. Less charming travelers occasionally donated teeth to roadside ditches. Chroniclers rarely recorded the messenger's personal heroics. They focused on the Duke's tantrum when correspondence arrived 3 days late. Food en route was character building. Inns served whatever survived the last delivery wagon. Stew of uncertain lineage, bread more defensive than edible, ale with personality. Spoiled stomachs weren't optional, they were initiation rites. Boiled water was a luxury, wine, safer, but scarce. Your digestive tract built resilience by necessity. Every sip came with an unspoken, please not dysentery, not this week. Sleep wherever you could. Barns, straw pallets, occasionally under stars with a cloak for company. Inns cost coin. Coin vanished quickly. Saddle sores became second nature. Letters soaked through storms despite wax seals. Ink bled, edges curled, and you prayed recipients appreciated effort over aesthetics. Anxieties compounded. You bore secrets. Royal messages weren't birthday cards. They whispered alliances, debts, sometimes please assassinate that cousin quietly. Capture meant interrogation, maybe torture, definitely awkward apologies. You rehearsed lies, hid messages in boots, even swallowed notes if panic struck. Romance with danger faded fast when cross-examination threatened. Yet messengers persisted. Why? Slightly better pay than plowing. Glimpses of distant towns, maybe the faint prestige of king's courier. Families bragged, "Our boy rides for the Earl." Glossy truth omitted saddle sores and seasonal frostbite. Let's amble through a real example. The king's posts of late medieval England, embryonic postal systems relying on hardy souls, relaying packets from staging in to staging in. Routes meandered, horses changed hands, weather scoffed at timetables. A blizzard in January could bury correspondence until April. Lords fumed, messengers shrugged, fingers thawing painfully by the hearth. Messengers often doubled as heralds, trumpeting arrivals, reading decrees aloud. Imagine reciting royal edicts to villagers barely interested, half suspicious you're inventing new taxes. Public speaking wasn't optional. If you mispronounced a baron's title, congratulations. You've just triggered a lecture on etiquette that lasts longer than your horse's patience. Clothing didn't help. Layered wool, stiff boots, cloaks heavy as guilt. Waterproofing? Mythical. Cloaks absorbed rain until they resembled mobile ponds. Dry socks became religion. A successful trip often meant nothing more profound than returning with all 10 toes. The myth of romantic wandering persists. Open road, freedom. Reality, endless mud, grumbling peasants, erratic tavern keepers, nightly prayer for intact letters. If you fell ill, tough luck. The Duke's patience didn't cover influenza, deliver, or risk dismissal. Winter off wasn't in the contract. Messengers also tiptoed around politics. Deliver a love letter to the wrong duchess? Scandal? Carry orders to a garrison that's secretly loyal to another faction? Treason charges. One misplaced comma could spark weeks of diplomatic sulking. Diplomacy was half charm, half dumb luck. A weary grin smoothed more transactions than any seal. The route home rarely sparkled. After 3 weeks of mud, exhaustion dulled ambition. Coin jingled thinly. Villagers barely glanced. Tomorrow, another letter. Prestige evaporated as you scraped mud from boots, wondering if goat herding might smell better. Despite misery, some thrived. They cultivated contacts, friendly innkeepers, Sympathetic reeves, hidden byways. Veteran messengers navigated politics like cats, never promising, never offending. Their advice: travel light, trust no gossip, pray often. Wisdom gleaned from years dodging both storms and human folly. Let's exhale, noticing how even the important jobs boiled down to survival, stamina, and a tolerance for discomfort. Medieval glamour was largely invented by later painters. Actual workers, from tasters to couriers, slogged through days that oscillated between boredom and mild peril. It's oddly comforting. Across centuries, human errands remain gloriously tedious. Now, for a change of scenery, we'll sidestep to the top of the social ladder, where everyone assumes luxury cancels stress. Spoiler: it doesn't. Few posts carried as much quiet absurdity as being a medieval royal heir, a life defined by boredom, tutors, and permanent observation.